the night sky has always been a mirror for human longing. Before history had a name, before cities rose from stone, there were only small fires flickering against the endless dark. Around those flames, fragile lives whispered into existence. Every breath carried the weight of hunger. Every shadow hinted at a predator's silent step. Yet within those same shadows burned something far greater, the spark of memory, of wonder, of a need to tell stories about where we came from and what we might become. Our planet holds secrets older than language, older than the bones of the mountains themselves. Beneath our feet lie forgotten epochs, entire worlds swallowed by time, their voices faint, but not entirely lost. Tonight, we journey into those forgotten ages, to glimpse what may have been and what still lingers in the silence between Earth and stars. If you feel that these hidden histories deserve to be remembered, I invite you to stay with us, to share these stories forward. A simple gesture, liking, subscribing, and passing this along, helps keep the fire lit so that our shared past and its riddles are not left to vanish into silence. The fire was more than light. It was a trembling heartbeat against the immensity of night, a fragile glow in a world that seemed endless, cold, and merciless. To our ancestors, it was not simply warmth, not merely a tool. It was a living boundary between survival and extinction, a circle carved into the darkness where life could unfold with some measure of safety. Around the flames, faces emerged and vanished in flickering patterns, shadows stretching across stone and earth, as if the night itself leaned close to listen. The scent of smoke clung to skins clothed in fur. The taste of ash settled on tongues that had known only hunger through the day, and eyes reflected the flames as though they carried suns within them. It was in these fires that humanity began to recognize itself, not just as scattered creatures wandering a perilous wilderness, but as a people bound by memory, ritual, and the fragile gift of story. The Pleistocene was not gentle. Vast glaciers sculpted the land with merciless patience. Winds swept across open tundra plains with a howl like voices lost in time, and predators prowled the edges of vision. Lions larger than any alive today, wolves that hunted in disciplined silence, and great bears whose power dwarfed the fragile bodies huddled near the flames. To live in such a world was to exist in constant negotiation with fear. And yet, it was precisely within that fear that a strange resilience took shape. For every night endured was a small triumph. Every dawn a miracle wrested from the jaws of an indifferent earth. Imagine the hands of an ancestor, scarred from stone and bone, reaching toward the fire's glow. In those hands rested not only a spear or a flint, but the weight of uncounted generations, instincts sharpened by necessity, and rituals whispered in the dark. The making of fire was an act so profound it bordered on the sacred. Sparks coaxed from stone became prayers in motion, tinder catching like the first breath of a newborn, flames rising as a testament to persistence. Fire was not merely discovered, it was courted, guarded, and revered. Its absence was death, its presence was hope. The darkness beyond the flames was alive with sound. The low groan of shifting ice, the distant crash of falling rock, the restless murmur of trees bending in the wind, and always, somewhere in the night, the call of beasts, the guttural roar of a cave lion, the deep bark of wolves gathering, the trumpeting of mammoths moving along ancient paths carved into the earth by time itself. For those gathered around the fire, every sound carried meaning. It might signal danger, it might hint at prey, or it might simply remind them of their own fragility in a world far larger than they could comprehend. To listen was to survive. To ignore was to vanish. Yet survival was not only about fear, it was also about beauty, about the subtle joys found in fleeting moments, the warmth of another body pressed close when the cold threatened to steal life away, the soft hum of a lullaby, sung without words but with tone, to calm a restless child. The dance of flame reflected in a pool of melting ice, turning the night into a canvas of shifting gold. In such moments, life was not just endured, it was lived, felt, remembered. And in those small sparks of joy, the foundation of something greater began to take root. It is possible, perhaps even likely, that story itself was born by firelight. Around the flames, gestures became meaning, sounds became symbols, and memory was carried forward not just in bone and blood, but in the fragile architecture of language. A hunter might trace the movement of mammoths in the air with his hand, marking their path through unseen landscapes. An elder might hum the rhythm of a hunt long past, her voice breaking into patterns that became the first echoes of song. Children might laugh as shadows twisted into strange forms on the cave wall, unknowingly shaping the earliest myths. Fire gave not only warmth, but vision, a canvas of light where the human imagination first found room to wander. And yet, for all its power, fire was fragile. A storm could drown it, a careless hand could smother it, and the long trek across frozen wastes could extinguish it entirely. To lose fire was to face the abyss. For this reason, embers were carried like treasure, cradled in bark or bone, protected with a reverence that bordered on devotion. Some groups may have passed flame from one band to another, as though sharing not merely warmth, but continuity itself. To hold fire was to hold the thread of existence, binding the present to the future in ways that could not yet be spoken, but were deeply understood. The landscapes of this world were as much characters in the story as the people themselves. Imagine valleys carved by ice, their walls towering like the bones of forgotten giants. Picture rivers locked beneath sheets of frozen glass, their hidden currents murmuring beneath the surface. Across the plains, herds of aurochs thundered in unison, each step shaking the ground like distant drums. To walk through such a world was to be forever aware of one's scale, small, fragile, and yet strangely defiant. For even in the face of such immensity, humans did not simply endure. They adapted, they imagined, they dreamed. At night, when the sky cleared, the stars revealed themselves in uncountable brilliance. For those early eyes, the heavens were not silent. They were alive with patterns, with movements that whispered of cycles beyond comprehension. Perhaps it was here, beneath the glittering spread of the cosmos, that the first questions were born. What lies beyond? Why are we here? Where do we go when the fire goes out? Such thoughts, fragile and formless, may have taken root in the silence of those nights, shaping not only belief, but identity. The fire was the earth's gift, but the stars were its mirror, reflecting back the mystery of existence itself. There is a haunting truth in recognizing how much of this has been lost. The voices of those first storytellers have vanished into wind and soil. Their names are dust, their lives unrecorded. And yet, in every flame we light today, whether on a candle, a hearth, or the glow of a modern city, we inherit something of their world. We are the continuation of that fragile defiance, the heirs of sparks coaxed into life by trembling hands. The fire still burns within us, though the darkness we face may have changed its form. The chapter of fire in the dark does not end with certainty. It lingers like smoke curling into the night, a reminder that our beginnings are written not in stone, but in flame. And as the embers fade and the night closes in, the story carries us forward, toward the vast plains where beasts and hunters meet, where life itself becomes a rhythm of pursuit and escape, of thunder and silence. It is to that world, the world of herds and hunters, that we must now turn, following the trail of footprints pressed deep into the soil of time. The earth trembled beneath their feet long before the hunters themselves could be seen. Across the horizon, the great herds moved like rivers of flesh and bone, waves of mammoth, bison, aurochs, and reindeer coursing over the ancient plains in endless migration. Their steps beat against the ground in a rhythm older than history, a thunder that echoed in the bones of those who followed. For the hunters, these migrations were lifelines, the promise of food, clothing, tools, and fire. But they were also peril itself, for to face a beast that outweighed a dozen men was to court death with every thrust of a spear. In that precarious balance between need and danger, human life unfolded as both predator and prey, always listening, always watching, always waiting for the right moment. The hunters were shadows against the snow, their bodies wrapped in furs stiff with frost, their eyes narrowed against winds that carried the bitter bite of ice. Spears tipped with flint, honed to lethal edges, were carried with reverence. These were not merely weapons, but extensions of the hand, the fragile answer to a world that could kill with tooth, claw, or hoof. Each movement of the hunt was measured, a ritual repeated countless times, but never guaranteed to succeed. They tracked with silence, reading signs in the soil, in broken branches, in the faint warmth of dung left steaming against the cold. To miss such signs was to go hungry. To read them well was to live another day. There is something almost dreamlike in imagining the scale of these hunts. Picture the silhouette of a woolly mammoth against the twilight, its shaggy form looming like a moving mountain, tusks curved like the horns of some primeval crescent moon. To bring such a creature down required not just courage, but coordination, the weaving together of human voices, hands, and instincts into a single desperate act. Hunters would flank from the sides, pushing the beast toward terrain that favored them. Steep embankments, marshes where its weight would drag it down, or cliffs where its footing might falter. Every step was calculation, every heartbeat a wager. And always, the knowledge lingered that failure could mean not only hunger, but trampled bodies, broken bones, the silence of death amid snow. Yet when success came, it was sacred. The beast fell, its breath rising in ragged clouds, its body shaking the ground with its last convulsions. Around it, the hunters gathered not only with relief, but with reverence. Knives of stone and bone were drawn, cutting through thick hide, separating sinew from flesh, harvesting life for life. The meat would feed the tribe, the skin would wrap them against the cold, the bones would form tools and shelters, the sinew would bind spears. Nothing was wasted, for waste was a sin against survival itself. In that careful division of body, the animal was both defeated and honored, its spirit absorbed into the story of those who endured. Around the fire, after such a hunt, the tribe became more than survivors. They became celebrants of existence. Stories of the chase unfolded in gestures and rhythms, in the reenactment of danger and triumph. Children watched wide-eyed as elders mimed the moment when spear struck flesh, when the great beast bellowed its last cry. Such performances were not simply entertainment, they were instruction, memory passed forward, embedding knowledge into the rhythm of collective life. The hunt was never forgotten. for it became a part of the tribe's identity, stitched into their sense of who they were and how they belonged to the world. But the herds were not always plentiful. The migrations were unpredictable, shifting with the seasons, with the whims of climate and the invisible hand of Earth's cycles. Sometimes the plains stretched empty, winds carrying nothing but silence. Hunger carved its mark into bodies, gnawed at resolve, drove groups to wander further, risking new territories, new dangers. Competition with other bands could turn violent, for when the herds vanished, desperation grew sharp as flint. In such times, survival demanded more than skill. It demanded luck, and perhaps something deeper still, a resilience of spirit that could endure even in famine. Predators shadowed the herds as faithfully as humans did. Wolves trotted silently along the edges, eyes gleaming with the promise of blood. Lions lay in wait among the grasses, their golden hides blending with earth, their ambushes swift and merciless. Bears, too, massive and solitary, claimed their share. To hunt was to risk confrontation, not just with prey, but with rivals far more powerful. A human band might emerge from a hunt not with bounty, but with wounds, sometimes with fewer voices around the fire. And yet, again and again, they returned to the chase, driven by hunger, but also by something deeper, the refusal to yield, the insistence that fragile flesh could contend with giants. It is easy, from the vantage of the present, to see only brutality in such a life, but within it lay moments of astonishing beauty. Imagine a winter dawn when frost glittered on the backs of reindeer, their breath rising like steam into the pale light. Imagine the silence broken only by the soft crack of snow beneath careful feet, the whisper of wind carrying the scent of prey. Imagine the moment when eyes met across species, hunter and hunted locked in recognition, each aware of the other's existence, each bound by necessity to the dance of survival. That moment, suspended between fear and awe, was perhaps as close to transcendence as the world of ice and stone could offer. And always, above it all, the sky loomed vast and eternal. The stars watched silently as blood-stained snow, as cries echoed across valleys, as life and death wove their endless rhythm. To those who looked upward after a hunt, covered in sweat and ash, the constellations may have offered not just mystery, but meaning. Perhaps the herds themselves were seen reflected above, their movements mirrored in patterns of light. Perhaps hunters traced the outlines of beasts among the stars, seeing in them the eternal cycle of pursuit and survival. In this way, the hunt became not just an act of necessity, but a ritual of connection, binding earth and sky, flesh and spirit, mortality and eternity. The echoes of that world still linger, in the bones of mammoths unearthed from frozen soil, in the cave paintings that show herds in motion, in the flint tools scattered like seeds across ancient landscapes. These fragments are not just relics. They are whispers of lives lived in defiance of silence. They remind us that humanity's story is not only one of invention and cities, but of blood and breath, of footsteps pressed into snow, of spears raised against the immensity of nature. We are children of that world still, our instincts shaped by it, our memories haunted by it, even if buried beneath centuries of forgetting. As the hunters sat by their fire, their bellies full, their hearts heavy with the cost of survival, they could not have known that they were laying the groundwork for futures they would never see. Every hunt, every ritual, every story told beneath the stars was a step on a path that led forward into history. For as the herds moved, so too did humans, following the rhythm of life into new lands, new challenges, and eventually, new ways of being. The chapter of hunters and herds closes not with certainty, but with motion, with footprints pressed into soil, with the distant thunder of hooves fading into the horizon, with the knowledge that survival is never permanent, only borrowed from the earth for as long as the chase continues. And as the fires dimmed and the hunters dreamed, seeds were already stirring in the ground, waiting to rewrite the story of humanity in a way even they could not have imagined. It is to those seeds, fragile yet eternal, that our story now turns. The first attempts at permanence, the dawn of settlement, the shaping of Earth itself into something more than wilderness. From the rhythm of the chase, we move into the stillness of cultivation, into the chapter where humanity plants its roots in soil and dares to call it home. The rhythm of the hunt had echoed for countless generations, its pulse measured by the thunder of hooves and the hiss of flint-tipped spears. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, a different rhythm began to shape the human story. It was quieter, gentler, and yet far more profound. It began with a seed pressed into the soil, a fragile gesture that would ripple through millennia. The ground, once seen only as a stage for movement and pursuit, became something else entirely, a vessel for permanence. Where once every horizon was temporary, where fires were lit and extinguished in endless cycles of migration, humans began to linger. They began to cultivate. They began to stay. Imagine the first hand scattering grains into earth, perhaps uncertain, perhaps imitating the natural cycle already witnessed in wild grasses. The stalks that sprouted were not immediate miracles, but slow promises, unfolding with patience foreign to the urgency of the hunt. When they ripened and could be gathered, the tribe found something extraordinary, food that did not flee, that did not require pursuit across frozen plains or perilous rivers. It was humble, fragile, and yet it carried within it the possibility of continuity. From such beginnings, the Neolithic age rose like a dawn after an eternal night. Settlements grew where once there had only been camps. Mud and stone were shaped into walls, thatched roofs braced against wind and rain. The landscape itself began to change, fields carved into patterns that would endure, rivers redirected to nourish crops, forests cleared to make space for new lives. Humanity's relationship with Earth shifted from transient use to deliberate transformation. No longer did survival depend entirely on the uncertain rhythm of herds. Now it could be coaxed from the soil, drawn up with water and sunlight, harvested by hand. This was not merely a change of technique, it was a revolution of being. Yet permanence was not without its shadows. To stay in one place was to bind oneself to the cycles of that land, to its droughts, its floods, its failures. A poor harvest could spell catastrophe, hunger gnawing at the edges of newly built walls. Disease, once dispersed by movement, found easier purchase among those who clustered together. And where land was claimed, boundaries emerged, and with them the seeds of rivalry. Scarcity did not vanish with cultivation. It changed its form, and so too did the struggles it inspired. The stillness of settlement was fragile, a delicate negotiation between human ambition and nature's indifference. But in that fragility bloomed something wondrous. For the first time, life was not dictated entirely by the chase. Time opened its hand, offering hours for tasks beyond survival. Tools grew more sophisticated, pottery was shaped and fired to store grain, and weaving transformed fibers into cloth. The first gardens of art flourished in this newfound stillness, symbols carved into stone, patterns painted onto vessels, rhythms beaten into drums. The act of staying allowed humanity not only to live, but to imagine. The seeds did not only reshape the earth, they reshaped the human spirit. When fields stretched green across the horizon, when granaries overflowed with stored harvests, when villages hummed with the rhythm of shared labor, a new sense of belonging took hold. The earth was no longer just a wilderness to be endured, but a home to be nurtured. The very idea of home, of a place bound to memory and identity, was born in these early settlements. With it came ancestry, lineage, the sense that one's life was part of something larger, carried forward through both soil and blood. Yet the Neolithic dawn carried mysteries still unresolved. Did these early farmers sense that they were altering the trajectory of humanity? Or were they simply responding to necessity, to the exhaustion of herds, to the pressures of survival? Archaeology offers us fragments, stone sickles worn by harvest, storage pits filled with grain, skeletons buried beneath houses. But what lingers most are the questions. Did they kneel to the earth in reverence, offering prayers to the unseen powers that made seeds sprout and rains fall? Did they sense divinity in the soil itself, in the mystery of transformation, in the miracle of life rising again from death? The shift from hunting to farming was not only practical, it was spiritual, a new covenant between humanity and earth. Rituals blossomed in tandem with fields. Fertility was celebrated, not only of people, but of the ground itself. Symbols of grain, of cycles, of rebirth, appeared in carvings and figurines. Shrines rose within villages, some simple, some astonishingly elaborate, their stones aligned with the heavens. To plant a seed was to trust in the unseen, to believe in the future, and to bind one's life to a rhythm beyond immediate perception. That trust demanded ritual, demanded myth, demanded meaning. The earliest gods may well have been born from the soil. Still, the old ways did not vanish completely. Hunters remained, their skills still vital, their spirits bound to the chase. The memory of movement lingered in stories told around the hearth, in rituals enacted at the edge of fields, in dances that recalled the herds once pursued. But slowly, those stories took on the tone of memory rather than necessity. The world of the hunt faded into legend, even as the world of the seed grew solid beneath bare feet. The transformation was not abrupt, but gradual, unfolding across generations, each one pressing deeper into the soil, further into the stillness of settlement. It is tempting to see this as progress, as a triumphant march toward civilization. But progress is never so simple, for while the seed offered security, it also offered burden. Fields had to be guarded, harvests stored, boundaries defended. Villages required order, cooperation, and often hierarchy. With surplus came inequality. With permanence came conflict. With home came the risk of loss. The seed gave humanity the possibility of more, but it also bound them to cycles of toil and uncertainty that the hunters had never known. The dawn of settlement was luminous, but it was also shadowed. And yet, from that dawn, humanity began to imagine permanence, not only for themselves, but for their stories. The first monuments rose, circles of stone, mounds of earth, alignments with the stars. These were not temporary shelters or tools of survival, but statements carved into time itself. They spoke of memory, of continuity, of the desire to anchor human existence against the vast tides of forgetting. In stone and soil, humans began to write the earliest chapters of permanence, leaving echoes that still reach us across thousands of years. The chapter of seeds is one of paradox, fragility and resilience, promise and peril, stillness and unrest. It is the chapter in which humanity first claimed the earth as its partner and its adversary, where the rhythm of life shifted from pursuit to patience. And as villages grew, as rituals deepened, as monuments rose, a new awareness stirred. The sense that the earth itself carried secrets, that the ground beneath their feet might hide older worlds, drowned lands, forgotten stories waiting to be uncovered. It is toward those stories, those drowned valleys and vanished coasts, that our path now bends. For if the seed gave humanity permanence, the sea reminded them of impermanence. And in the memory of those drowned lands lies the next mystery, the echoes of places lost, swallowed by water, yet remembered in whispers and myths that linger still. The sea has always been both cradle and devourer. Its waves carry life to shore, and its tides erase entire landscapes as though they never were. To our earliest ancestors, the coastline was not fixed, not a border between permanence and infinity, but a shifting edge where earth and water contended in endless struggle. There were valleys where rivers once wound through fertile soil, where people hunted and built, where fires warmed small gatherings against the cold. And then, over years so slow that no single lifetime could measure them, the waters crept forward. The ocean rose. The land was swallowed. Whole worlds vanished beneath the waves, their traces preserved only in memory, in silence, or in the myths that still drift like salt upon the air. Doggerland, now buried beneath the North Sea, once stretched as an immense plain between what is now Britain and mainland Europe. It was a world alive with rivers, marshes, forests, and game. Herds of red deer moved through meadows, wild horses grazed, hunters stalked along reed-lined banks. Families built shelters, lit fires, and watched the seasons turn beneath an open sky. To stand there, one would never have thought that such abundance could vanish. Yet as the last ice age ended and glaciers melted, the seas swelled, swallowing field after field, forest after forest, until the land was gone. Only fishermen's nets, dredging up antlers or tools from the seabed, whisper that it was ever real. Such losses were not unique. Far to the east, Sundaland stretched across what is now the islands of Southeast Asia, a vast landmass where rivers carved fertile valleys and people roamed across landscapes that today lie hidden beneath tropical seas. In Japan, whole coastlines shifted as water rose, reshaping the archipelago. Along the shores of the Americas, settlements were displaced, their hearths extinguished by advancing tides. In every corner of the world, humanity faced the sea's slow reclamation, and with it, the need to remember what had been lost. The stories that survive from ancient cultures often speak of floods, world-spanning deluges, gods who drowned the earth, waters that erased whole civilizations in a single sweep. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the tale of Noah's Ark, the Indian story of Manu and the fish, the Mayan Popol Vuh, all carry echoes of overwhelming waters. Scholars debate whether these are mythic metaphors or the memory of real floods preserved through countless retellings. Perhaps they are both. Memory clothed in the garments of story, history carried in myth's embrace. The drowned lands may have inspired such tales, turning tragedy into legend, survival into parable. For those who watched the waters rise, the experience must have been a mixture of dread and awe. Imagine a village beside a fertile plain, the river widening year by year, storms gnawing at the earth, the sea pressing closer with each generation. Children would play in fields their parents remembered as forest. Elders would shake their heads at horizons that had crept inward. And one day, the waves would arrive at the hearth itself, the fire sputtering as the tide claimed it. Families would be forced to move, to leave behind not only homes but the very ground that had defined them. The land was not simply territory. It was memory, identity, ancestry. To lose it was to lose a piece of the self. Yet human beings, resilient as always, did not only mourn, they adapted. They carried their stories inland, wove their losses into ritual and legend, carved warnings into myth for those yet unborn. A drowned land was never truly gone so long as its memory lived. Perhaps this is why flood myths persist so vividly across the globe. They are not merely tales of divine wrath or cosmic cleansing, but echoes of a shared human wound, the memory of losing whole worlds to the sea. It is here that speculation often blooms. Some wonder whether beneath those waters lie not only villages of mud and reed, but structures more complex, more astonishing, monuments, temples, perhaps even cities. Off the coast of India, the ruins near Dwarka have been interpreted by some as remnants of a drowned civilization. In Japan's Yonaguni Formation, massive stone-like structures beneath the waves stir debate. Are they natural formations or the work of ancient hands? Mainstream archaeology hesitates, reminding us that erosion and geology can craft wonders as easily as human effort. And yet, the imagination lingers. Could it be that beneath the seas lie fragments of cultures advanced for their time, erased by the indifference of rising tides? Even without grand civilizations, the reality of drowned worlds remains profound. Every artifact pulled from the seabed, a harpoon, a shard of pottery, a splintered bone, testifies to lives lived in landscapes we can no longer walk. These fragments remind us that human history is not a straight line drawn upon unchanging ground, but a fragile script written on shifting sand. To study the drowned lands is to confront the impermanence of all things, to recognize that permanence is an illusion, that even the ground beneath our feet can betray us. And yet, perhaps it is precisely this impermanence that gave rise to humanity's hunger for memory. When the sea swallowed Doggerland, it left no stone circle to mark its existence. When Sunderland vanished, its temples, if they ever stood, crumbled beneath waves. But the people who lived there carried their grief and wonder into stories, and those stories endured. Memory is the true monument, and myth the vessel in which it is carried across time. In the drowned lands, we glimpse both the fragility of human life and the endurance of human imagination. The sea may erase villages, but it cannot silence the longing to remember, the instinct to shape loss into narrative. Every flood myth, every whisper of Atlantis or lost continents, is a testament to this refusal to forget. And perhaps, beneath the waves, something still waits to be uncovered. Artifacts sealed in silt, carvings preserved in darkness, silent witnesses to lives lived long before ours. The chapter of drowned lands closes with a haunting truth, that no ground is eternal, that every horizon may one day vanish beneath waters that know no mercy. And yet, from this truth also rises a strange strength. For though the earth shifts, though seas rise, though worlds are lost, humanity endures, not unscathed, but unbroken, carrying memory like fire through the long corridors of time. And as we move from the sea's silence to the stones that still stand upon dry land, we encounter another kind of endurance. Monuments raised not to survive but to speak. Vast stones aligned with sky and season, carved with patterns whose meanings have not yet faded. If the drowned lands whisper of what has been lost, then these stones roar of what was meant to be remembered. It is toward those stones and the riddles they carry that our journey now turns. Stone endures where flesh and wood decay. It rises from the earth with a silence that feels deliberate, as though it were meant to outlast wind, water, and the fragile stories of those who shaped it. Long after the fires of ancient hearths have cooled to dust, long after the bones of hunters and farmers have crumbled into soil, the stones remain. They stand in circles, in avenues, in solitary guardianship over landscapes that have themselves transformed, whispering through their very presence that humanity sought permanence, order, and perhaps a way to speak to the cosmos itself. Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Anatolia is among the oldest of these enigmas. Over 12,000 years ago, long before cities, before even pottery or the wheel, hands carved towering pillars from limestone, arranging them in circles and decorating them with animals etched in relief: foxes, birds, serpents, wild boar. No houses surrounded this sanctuary. No evidence of daily life clings to the soil. Instead, it seems to have been built purely for gathering, for ritual, for something beyond survival. To carve and raise such stones required planning, cooperation, and vision that we once believed only later civilizations possessed. Its existence pushes back the horizon of human complexity, suggesting that long before plows and permanent villages, there was already the impulse to reach for something transcendent. And Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Across the earth, stones rise in patterns that defy coincidence. In Ireland, Newgrange's Great Passage tomb aligns perfectly with the winter solstice, flooding its inner chamber with light on the shortest day of the year. In Britain, the massive trilithons of Stonehenge mark the turning of seasons, their arrangement mapping the dance of sun and moon. In Malta, megalithic temples predate even the pyramids of Egypt, their curved walls echoing organic forms, their altars perhaps once echoing with prayers to gods now forgotten. These monuments suggest a universal human impulse to bind the heavens to the earth, to inscribe cosmic order onto the landscape. What did these builders believe they were doing? Were they calling down the favor of unseen powers, marking time for harvest and ritual, or recording knowledge in a language of stone? Archaeologists point to astronomical alignments, ritual use, burial practices. Yet beyond such explanations lingers something harder to name, a longing to transcend the fleeting span of a single life, to place memory into forms that would endure even as generations passed. The stones, unyielding and monumental, became both mirror and anchor for a humanity newly aware of its own impermanence. The scale of these works demands reflection. Without iron tools, without beasts of burden as we know them, without wheels, how did early peoples drag stones weighing tons across miles of uneven ground? Ropes, levers, sledges. Yes, but even such practicalities do not explain the deeper mystery, the will to attempt it at all. To raise a monolith into place is not merely engineering, it is devotion. It is a statement that some knowledge, some ritual, some vision of the cosmos mattered more than hunger or fatigue. Entire communities must have been summoned to the task, working not for immediate survival, but for a purpose larger, unseen, and enduring. Carvings on these stones deepen the mystery. Spirals, serpents, solar disks, interlacing patterns. They appear again and again across continents and millennia. Are they purely decorative, or do they encode knowledge, astronomical cycles, myths? The spiral could be the path of the sun, the journey of the soul, the rhythm of seasons. The serpent could signify rebirth, danger, or the undulating rivers that carved valleys. To stand before such carvings is to be confronted with meaning felt, but not fully understood, messages left in a language whose key we may never hold. The power of stone is not only in its endurance, but in its silence. Unlike written words that tell us directly what was meant, stones force us into dialogue, into speculation. They refuse to answer fully, and in that refusal lies their enchantment. We project onto them, we wonder, we imagine. In this sense, they achieve what perhaps they were always meant to keep the mystery alive, to ensure that each generation revisits the questions of life, death, time, and cosmos. Consider the atmosphere at a solstice gathering thousands of years ago. The community gathers before dawn, breath rising into the chill air, eyes fixed on the horizon. A shaft of sunlight pierces the stone passage, striking the inner chamber, illuminating carvings that had waited a year for this single moment. Gasps ripple through the crowd, voices lift in awe, and for a brief instant, heaven and earth meet. Such moments wove time itself into ritual, binding human lives to cycles larger than themselves. In stone, those cycles were made visible, tangible, eternal. Yet speculation whispers at the edges of such marvels. Could these stones be the remnants of knowledge older still, fragments inherited from cultures erased by catastrophe? The younger Dryas, the floods that drowned lands, the upheavals of climate, did they wipe away earlier societies, leaving only stone as their testament? Some scholars suggest Göbekli Tepe may have preserved sky maps of constellations, a memory of cosmic events witnessed by ancestors closer to cataclysmic changes in the heavens. The evidence remains contested, fragile, tantalizing. Still, the possibility lingers, drawing us into the question of what humanity once knew and what it chose to remember in stone. Even today, these megaliths exert power. Pilgrims, scholars, wanderers, all come to touch the rough surfaces, to feel the chill of morning light striking ancient chambers, to stand in circles that have outlasted empires. They connect us not only to the people who raised them, but to the very impulse to mark existence in a way that resists oblivion. In this way, the stones are both ancient and immediate, reminders that though our tools have changed, our desire to anchor meaning against the abyss of time remains the same. The chapter of stones is one of voices that refuse silence, of messages carved into the landscape not in words but in weight, alignment, and endurance. They speak of humans who were not content merely to survive, but who reached upward and outward, seeking to weave themselves into the fabric of cosmos and eternity. Each stone is both a question and an answer, a boundary between what we know and what we long to understand. And yet, even these stones are not immune to time. Erosion wears their surfaces, lichen obscures carvings, collapse reduces grandeur to rubble. The permanence they promised is always relative, always vulnerable to the slow grind of centuries. Perhaps this too was part of the message, that nothing is truly eternal, but in striving to carve meaning into the earth, humanity creates a dialogue with time itself. From the stones, we move to another riddle, one not of deliberate construction, but of catastrophe. For while stones endure in their silence, the earth itself can reset with sudden violence. Ice melts, climates shift, fire consumes, floods erase. Civilizations may rise only to vanish, leaving behind mysteries we can scarcely grasp. It is toward this possibility, the great resets of history, the whispers of civilizations lost, that our journey must now turn. Ice and fire, flood and famine. These forces, silent for centuries, can awaken with a fury that reshapes the world in an instant. For most of human history, survival has been about adapting to gradual change. The slow shift of seasons, the long migration of herds, the steady rhythm of planting and harvest. But there are moments when the earth itself convulses, when the balance tilts so suddenly that entire ways of life are erased. The hypothesis of resets, the idea that civilizations, however fragile, may have risen only to be swept away, lingers like a shadow in archaeology, part science, part myth, part haunting possibility. The younger Dryas, 12,000 years ago, is the clearest of these moments. As the last ice age drew to an end, glaciers receded, and the world seemed poised to warm into a gentler epoch. But then, almost without warning, the climate snapped back into cold. Temperatures plunged, ice surged again, and for over 1,000 years, humanity was thrust back into a harsher, more unforgiving world. What caused this sudden reversal remains debated. Perhaps the collapse of vast ice sheets releasing torrents of fresh water into the oceans, disrupting currents. Perhaps the impact of a comet scattering dust into the atmosphere. Perhaps a combination of forces we still struggle to untangle. Whatever its origin, the result was catastrophic. Ecosystems collapsed, megafauna vanished, and the tenuous beginnings of agriculture faltered under the weight of cold. For hunter-gatherers, the change meant returning to desperate endurance, abandoning experiments in settlement, pressing deeper into survival's edge. But for those who speculate about lost civilizations, the younger Dryas carries another implication. Could it have erased something more advanced than we allow ourselves to imagine? Might there have been cultures along coastlines now drowned, cities whose traces lie buried beneath silt and sea, knowledge scattered like ash by the upheaval? Mainstream archaeology urges caution, noting that evidence of such civilizations remains elusive. Yet the possibility lingers in myths, in structures that seem anomalous, in the tantalizing gaps of the archaeological record. The allure of the reset hypothesis is not simply that it explains anomalies, but that it echoes the stories humanity has always told itself. Myths of floods, of fire from the sky, of golden ages destroyed in wrath or disaster. They appear across continents, separated by oceans, cultures, and time. Plato's Atlantis is the most famous, a tale of a proud people drowned by the sea. But there are others. The Hopi speak of worlds destroyed by fire and water. The Hindu texts recall ages ended by floods and cosmic upheaval. Norse mythology remembers Fimbulwinter, an endless cold preceding Ragnarok. Perhaps these are only stories, allegories for human frailty. Or perhaps they are memories, distorted, mythologized, but rooted in real catastrophes witnessed by ancestors who struggled to understand what had happened. The reset hypothesis gains further strength when we consider how much of the human story is missing. Archaeology is a science of fragments. Most of what has ever existed is lost. Wood rotted, fabrics decayed, bones crumbled. Entire landscapes are submerged, entire valleys buried under silt and stone. To believe that what survives is all that ever was is to underestimate both time's cruelty and humanity's ingenuity. It is possible, even likely, that much has been forgotten. Not just objects, but knowledge, practices, and ways of life as complex in their own manner as anything that came after. But the danger of the reset hypothesis is also clear. It tempts us into fantasy. To imagine cities of gleaming stone, technologies rivaling our own, civilizations erased without trace. It is intoxicating, but it must remain speculation. Archaeology works slowly, cautiously, resisting the urge to fill silence with certainty. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Perhaps there were not grand empires with machines and towers, but smaller cultures, more advanced than we once thought possible, whose innovations were drowned, their stories surviving only as myth. To frame this as possibility rather than proof is to honor both imagination and evidence, to leave space for wonder without collapsing into falsehood. Reset is not always sudden. Sometimes it creeps forward like an invisible tide. A volcano erupts, its ash blanketing fields and choking skies. Crops fail, hunger spreads, communities scatter. An earthquake reshapes a valley, rivers divert, settlements vanish. Famine follows drought, drought follows shifting winds, and slowly lives unravel. To those who lived through such times, it must have felt like the end of the world. And perhaps, in their world, it was. Where civilization is always local before it is universal. To lose a valley, a harvest, a city is to lose a world entire. Consider Thera, where a massive eruption in the Bronze Age shattered the island, spewed ash across the Aegean, and left echoes in myth, perhaps even inspiring the tale of Atlantis. Consider Pompeii, where a single day of fire from Vesuvius froze an entire community in time. Consider the eruptions in Iceland that darkened medieval skies, or the Tambora eruption in 1815 that caused a year without summer, its chill reaching across continents. These are not distant possibilities, but recorded events, reminders that catastrophe does not only belong to prehistory. What makes the resets of deep time so compelling is that they lie beyond memory, but not beyond imagination. When we uncover a stone circle aligned with the stars, when we find carvings of animals long extinct, when we dredge artifacts from beneath the sea, we are reminded that the past is not fully known. It is a shadowed landscape, glimpsed in fragments, inviting speculation. And in that speculation lies both danger and wonder. For to imagine what might have been is to recognize the fragility of what is, to see our own civilization as temporary, contingent, vulnerable. Perhaps this is the true gift of the reset hypothesis. Whether or not great civilizations once felt a fire or flood, the possibility humbles us. It reminds us that the ground we walk is not guaranteed, that the earth is not fixed but restless, that the permanence we claim is an illusion. It urges us to remember that resilience is never absolute, that memory itself can be drowned. And yet, it also reminds us that humanity endures, not unchanged, but adaptive, carrying fragments forward into new epochs. If resets occurred, they did not erase us entirely. We are the proof of survival, the descendants of those who faced collapse and carried light into the dark. The story of resets closes not with despair but with a question. If the earth has erased worlds before, how much of ourselves might be erased in the future? What will survive of our cities, our machines, our words? Will stone again outlast us, speaking in silence to those who come after? The resets of the past whisper not only of what was lost, but of what may yet be lost again. And from here, the path leads inward, into chambers carved in darkness, into caves where humanity first etched memory into stone. For if catastrophe erases, art resists. The paintings of animals on cavern walls, the burial chambers aligned with light, the rituals enacted in silence, they are humanity's answer to oblivion. In the underworld of caves and tombs, voices still linger, echoing through time with the persistence of memory. It is into those depths, into the voices from the underworld, that we must now descend. Beneath the surface of the earth, where daylight falters and silence presses close, humanity carved its oldest sanctuaries. The caves of Europe, Asia, and the Americas are not mere shelters from wind and cold. They are vaults of memory, chambers where firelight revealed visions etched and painted in ochre, charcoal, and mineral hues. In those depths, where shadows danced upon walls, the living and the dead, The natural and the supernatural seemed to touch. These were not places of daily habitation. They were spaces apart, where the ordinary gave way to the extraordinary, where voices whispered across thresholds that separated the seen from the unseen. The painted caves of Lascaux and Chauvet remain some of the most haunting testaments to this impulse. Herds of horses gallop across stone walls, bison lock horns in eternal struggle, lions prowl in lines of ochre and black. The animals are rendered not crudely, but with astonishing skill, their muscles and motion captured with an eye for life's rhythm. Some figures overlap, as though painted in layers of memory, each generation adding to a tapestry of vision. To stand in those chambers is to feel the pulse of something beyond mere art. It is ritual. It is myth. It is humanity reaching through pigment to grasp a truth larger than survival. Why did they enter such depths to paint? The effort was immense. Torches burned precious fuel. Pigments had to be ground, scaffolds erected. Some chambers lie so far within that crawling through narrow passages is the only way to reach them. These were not convenient spaces. They were chosen for their seclusion, their silence, their strangeness. The walls themselves became portals, the flickering of firelight transforming painted figures into living presences. In this alchemy of darkness and flame, the animals might have been more than images. They might have been spirits, guides, ancestors, or gods. Burial practices, too, speak of the underworld. Graves lined with ochre, bodies adorned with beads, tools, and ornaments placed beside the dead, all suggest a belief that death was not an end, but a passage. Red ochre, symbolizing blood and rebirth, marked bodies as though preparing them for another life. In tombs, such as those of Newgrange or the Hypogea of Malta, architecture itself became ritual. Corridors aligned with solstices, chambers sealed in darkness until pierced by light on a single day of the year. These were not merely resting places, but theaters of renewal, where death and time were woven into cosmic cycles. The underworld is a theme that transcends cultures. In myths from Greece to Mesoamerica, descent into darkness is a journey of transformation. Orpheus descends to bring back Eurydice, but loses her at the threshold. The Maya imagined Xibalba, a realm of trials and shadow. In Egypt, the dead traversed a perilous underworld guided by spells and guarded by gods, hoping to emerge reborn with the rising sun. These myths may not have originated in the caves themselves, but the caves gave form to the idea. Entering the earth, surrounded by silence and flickering visions, was to confront mortality, to imagine continuance, to ritualize the hope that death could be bridged. Shamanic traditions may hold part of the answer. Across cultures, shamans descend, sometimes literally into caves or earth lodges, sometimes metaphorically through trance, seeking visions, guidance, or healing from spirits. The cave, with its echoing chambers and altered light, provides the perfect stage for such journeys. Painted animals could be allies or adversaries in visions, the act of painting itself a ritual of invocation. The beating of drums, the chant of voices, the inhalation of smoke, all could turn stone chambers into doorways of the mind, thresholds where human and spirit worlds intertwined. And yet, we must be careful not to impose certainty. The caves refuse to answer directly. Archaeologists can measure pigments, carbon date torches, analyze footprints left in clay, but the meaning remains elusive. Perhaps the animals were records of hunts, teaching tools for the young. Perhaps they were calendars of migration, marking the rhythm of herds. Perhaps they were prayers, invocations, offerings. Or perhaps they were all of these at once, meanings layered like the images themselves. The ambiguity is part of their power. They demand that we wonder, that we imagine, that we recognize how much of human thought lies beyond recovery. What lingers most is the sense of presence. To stand in a cave chamber where paintings have endured for tens of thousands of years is to feel the nearness of those who created them. Their breath still seems to echo in the damp air. Their hands press against stone in negative outlines as if reaching across time. The underworld is not merely a mythic realm. It is a place where past and present meet, where memory survives in pigment and shadow. In this way, the caves are not only about death, but about continuity, a way of ensuring that voices never entirely fade. The tombs, too, echo with this desire for continuity. In Malta, in the Halsaflieni Hypogeum, a vast underground complex carved into limestone, chambers echo with extraordinary acoustics. A single voice in its central chamber can resonate through the whole complex, vibrating in ways that seem designed for ritual. Was this deliberate? A manipulation of sound to heighten trance and ceremony? The answer is uncertain, but the experience is undeniable. Stone and sound combine to transform human voices into something otherworldly. In such places, the living might have spoken to the dead, or believed they heard the dead answer back. The underworld is not only darkness and silence, but also transformation. Seeds must be buried before they sprout. Water springs from hidden depths. Death precedes rebirth. Perhaps this was the lesson our ancestors sought in caves and tombs, that by descending, by confronting shadow, by speaking into silence, one could touch the eternal cycles of life and death. The rituals, the paintings, the burials, all echo this rhythm of descent and return, loss and renewal. But the underworld carries another layer of mystery, the possibility that knowledge itself was preserved there. Could the carvings and alignments, the symbols painted and etched, encode information not yet deciphered? Were the caves mere sanctuaries, or were they also archives, repositories of knowledge hidden in mythic form? The thought lingers, tantalizing, drawing us deeper into speculation. What is certain is that the voices from the underworld still reach us. They reach in ochre horses galloping across stone. They reach in skeletons carefully adorned with beads. They reach in the echo of footsteps preserved in clay floors, where children once walked with torches held high. They remind us that memory is not only in words but in images, in rituals, in the very act of descending into shadow and daring to return. From these depths, the journey of humanity does not end. For if caves and tombs opened doors into the underworld, myths also opened doors into the heavens. The next chapter turns not inward, but upward, into tales of beings descending from the sky, of knowledge gifted, of visitors whose origins are still debated. Whether gods, ancestors, or dreams, these visitors of memory stretch our gaze from the dark earth into the wide expanse of the cosmos. From the silence of caves and the depths of tombs, the human gaze turned upward. If the underworld offered answers in darkness, the sky promised mysteries in light. Across every horizon, myths took shape of beings who descended from above, gods, ancestors, messengers from realms beyond human reach. These, visitors of memory, appear in the stories of countless peoples scattered across continents, separated by oceans, yet strangely resonant with one another. Were they dreams born of awe, visions conjured in trance, or memories of encounters we can no longer explain? Whatever their source, they carried knowledge, transformation, and a sense that humanity was not alone in its unfolding journey. the Mesopotamians spoke of the Anunnaki, deities who came from the heavens to shape destinies and bestow kingship. In Egypt, the god Thoth brought writing, wisdom, and order, his ibis-headed form a symbol of knowledge beyond mortal grasp. The Dogon people of Mali tell of Nomo, amphibious beings who descended from the star Sirius and taught the rhythms of agriculture and the secrets of the cosmos. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was remembered as a bringer of maize, of calendars, of civilization itself. In Polynesian traditions, gods arrived by canoe across the seas of heaven, carrying gifts of navigation, fire, and song. Each of these myths speaks of gifts bestowed, knowledge granted, humanity lifted into new ways of being by powers descending from elsewhere. Skeptics point to human imagination as the source. The sky has always overwhelmed, the sun's blaze, the moon's glow, the uncountable stars turning in eternal procession. It was natural to see patterns, to personify forces, to imagine beings dwelling above who might intervene below. Shamans in trance might have envisioned journeys into the heavens, encounters with luminous figures, flights into realms beyond waking life. These visions, retold, could become myths of descent and visitation. Yet still, the resonance across cultures lingers. Why should so many traditions, scattered and isolated, share this theme of visitors from above? One answer lies in memory. Humanity may have encoded real encounters with the unfamiliar into myth. Strange celestial events, comets streaking the sky, meteors burning into the earth, eclipses swallowing the sun, would have inspired awe and terror. Survivors of cataclysms, wanderers from distant lands, or teachers with unfamiliar knowledge might have seemed like beings from another world. Over generations, memory blurred into legend, and legend into myth, until what remained was the story of gods descending with gifts. There is also the more speculative thought. What if some of these myths preserve faint echoes of encounters we cannot easily explain within ordinary history? The idea of extraterrestrial visitors has fascinated modern minds, but in truth, whether literal or symbolic, the question remains the same. Why did humanity choose to frame its earliest leaps in knowledge as gifts from beyond? Perhaps the answer is humility. Perhaps when agriculture transformed existence, when writing reshaped memory, when navigation unlocked the seas, the scale of such changes seemed too vast to attribute only to human hands. To say, the gods gave this, was not denial of human effort, but recognition of mystery, of the sense that knowledge itself carries something otherworldly. What unites all these myths is the theme of transformation. The visitors do not arrive to destroy, but to teach, to shift humanity into a new relationship with time, earth, and cosmos. They are bringers of fire, of seeds, of calendars, of order. In their hands, chaos becomes rhythm, silence becomes language, wandering becomes settlement. Humanity's great leaps are cast as gifts, and gifts imply relationship. The myths suggest that we are not isolated, but part of a wider web of existence, linked by exchange, by dialogue, by memory shared between realms. But the visitors are not always benevolent. Some myths speak of jealousy, wrath, punishment from above, floods unleashed, towers struck down, fire raining from the sky. The same powers that grant knowledge also guard its boundaries. To transgress, to overreach, invites retribution. In this way, myths of visitors often echo humanity's own ambivalence about knowledge. It saves, it transforms, it uplifts, but it also endangers. To hold the fire of the gods is to risk being burned. Archaeology, for its part, treads carefully. It sees in these stories not literal visitations, but the flowering of human imagination, shaped by celestial observation. Alignments of temples and stones with solstices and equinoxes, myths tied to the rising of certain stars, calendars rooted in lunar and solar cycles, all show a deep engagement with the sky. The visitors may not have been beings descending, but the sky itself, descending into human thought, impressing its patterns onto ritual and story. To track the heavens was to predict the future, to shape agriculture, to order society. The sky was both teacher and visitor, a constant presence inspiring reverence. Yet the question remains, why do the stories endure with such vitality? Why do we still feel wonder at the thought of descent, of knowledge gifted from beyond? Perhaps because these myths mirror our own condition. We too live as recipients of mysteries we do not fully understand. Life itself, consciousness itself, the very ability to ask questions, each feels like a gift, a visitation from a realm beyond our grasp. Myths of visitors of memory are humanity's way of acknowledging that we are shaped not only by our own hands, but by forces larger, stranger, and more enduring than ourselves. Standing beneath the night sky, one can still feel the presence of those visitors. The stars look unchanged since the first eyes gazed upward. The Milky Way still arcs like a river of light across the void. Meteors still fall with sudden brilliance. In those moments, imagination awakens. We sense that we are not alone, that the cosmos itself is alive with presence. Whether or not beings descended in the past, the feeling of visitation remains real, carried in awe, in wonder, in the silence of gazing upward. The chapter of the visitors does not end with answers, but with echoes. The myths remain, woven into culture, art, and memory, reminding us that humanity's path has always been guided by more than necessity. It has been guided by wonder, by visions of contact with the beyond, by the sense that knowledge itself comes from a source we can revere but never fully claim. And as we leave these visitors, we turn not upward but downward again, into the fragile traces left upon the earth itself. Carved glyphs, undeciphered signs, scripts, whose meanings remain locked in silence. If the visitors gave us memory, then language became its vessel. Yet some of these vessels remain sealed, their contents unknown, their voices unheard. It is into this silence of undeciphered scripts, of forgotten tongues, that we must now listen, seeking the meaning hidden in signs that have outlasted the people who made them. Across the earth lie signs etched in stone, pressed into clay, carved upon wood, and inscribed upon bone. They are voices without sound, words without living speakers, messages sealed in silence. Some have yielded their secrets, like cuneiform and hieroglyphs, painstakingly deciphered to reveal the rhythm of ancient life. But others remain locked, their meaning inaccessible, their symbols staring back at us like riddles posed across millennia. These forgotten scripts are more than puzzles. They are the lingering presence of minds that sought permanence, communities that once spoke, remembered, and dreamed. To gaze upon them is to feel the weight of memory pressed into signs we cannot yet read, as if the past itself were whispering in a language forever out of reach. The Indus Valley script is among the most tantalizing. Thousands of seals, tablets, and fragments bear its compact signs, some pictorial, some abstract, arranged in patterns that suggest language, yet without a Rosetta Stone to guide us. These symbols, stamped into clay and carved into steatite, accompanied one of the world's great early civilizations, whose cities at Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro thrived with astonishing planning. Streets ran straight, drainage systems channeled waste, wells and granaries revealed order and foresight. And yet, The script resists interpretation. Were the signs logograms, phonetic syllables, ritual marks, or something else entirely? Without longer texts, without bilingual inscriptions, their meaning slips away. What we hold are fragments of a conversation that once carried authority, ritual, and memory, now silenced, waiting in vain for translation. On Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, another enigma persists: the Rongorongo script. Carved into wooden tablets, its flowing glyphs resemble stylized humans, animals, and abstract forms, arranged in lines that must be rotated to be read. The surviving tablets are few, their provenance often uncertain, and their meaning entirely obscure. Were they records of genealogy, chants of ritual, calendars of celestial events? Or were they symbolic notations, art mistaken for writing? The culture that created them suffered collapse under ecological strain, conflict, and colonial impact, leaving no one to explain the script. Today, it rests in museums, silent wood once carried by ocean currents, preserving a voice that refuses to speak. Even in civilizations we think we know, fragments remain unread. Linear A from Minoan Crete, predecessor to Linear B, taunts linguists with its undeciphered signs. The Olmec symbols of Mesoamerica suggest the earliest writing in the Americas, but remain only partially understood. The Vinca symbols of southeastern Europe, scratched onto pottery 5,000 years ago, may be proto-writing or ritual marks, but their intent is lost. Each script reminds us that literacy is fragile, dependent not only on symbols, but on continuity, on communities to teach and transmit. When that chain is broken, words dissolve into ornament, meaning collapses into silence. And yet, the presence of these scripts stirs something profound. To see them is to recognize that humanity has always sought permanence through symbols. Spoken words vanish with breath, but signs endure. They anchor memory in clay, in stone, in wood. They transform the fleeting into the lasting. In this way, even scripts we cannot read achieve their purpose. They remind us that those who came before thought deeply, organized richly, imagined widely. They remind us that our story is not one of simple progress, but of complexity gained and lost, of knowledge remembered and forgotten. What if some of these undeciphered scripts hold knowledge that could reshape our understanding of the past? The Indus seals may reveal not only ritual, but governance, trade, perhaps even mythic narratives. Rongorongo may contain echoes of chants long silenced, their rhythm tied to the stars, their imagery preserving cosmologies we can no longer recover. Linear A may carry prayers to deities erased by the sea. The possibility lingers like a promise that hidden in these signs are entire worlds waiting to be heard again. But there is also humility in their silence. It reminds us that memory is not invincible. Human knowledge, however carefully inscribed, is fragile. A fire, a flood, a conquest, a collapse, any of these can sever continuity. We inherit fragments, not because the ancients were careless, but because time itself is ruthless. In this sense, the forgotten scripts are mirrors. They show us not only what we have lost, but what we may one day lose of our own. Our words, too, may become unreadable symbols, our languages strange to future minds, our archives fragments mistaken for ritual. The forgotten scripts of the past foreshadow the forgetting of the future. There is also beauty in the mystery. To encounter a line of undeciphered signs is to be drawn into dialogue with absence. It demands imagination, speculation, humility. It keeps the past alive not as certainty, but as question. The Indus Valley seals with their strange animals and patterns, the flowing glyphs of Rongorongo, the sharp strokes of Linear A. all confront us with the same invitation: to listen, to wonder, to recognize that human thought is wider than what we understand. In that sense, the silence is itself a kind of speech, a reminder that mystery is part of our inheritance. And so, we stand before these signs as before the megaliths and drowned lands, with reverence. They are not failures of communication, but testimonies of endurance. They tell us that humans have always sought to leave a mark, to carve memory into matter, to speak across time. Even when meaning is lost, the gesture remains. The hand that carved, the mind that imagined, the community that valued, these are still present in the grooves of stone and the etched lines of clay. The scripts are not dead. They are sleeping, waiting for ears that may never come. From forgotten scripts, the path leads outward to the vastest of mirrors. For if the earth holds memory in symbols and stones, the heavens hold memory in silence and light. Above us, the moon shines with a stillness older than any inscription, carrying scars of impacts older than humanity itself. Some myths whisper that the moon is more than a rock, that it holds secrets of civilizations before ours, that it is both witness and participant in the story of Earth. Whether myth, speculation, or science, the moon remains humanity's eternal companion, silent, constant, reflecting both our curiosity and our fragility. It is to the moon, that mirror of time, that we must now turn. For in its pale glow lies the closing of our journey. The question of whether Earth's forgotten past is echoed not only in soil and stone, but in the heavens themselves. The moon has always been with us, an eternal witness in the night sky. It rises over every horizon, follows every generation, and gazes down upon every fire that ever flickered in the darkness. To the first humans, it must have seemed alive, a presence that waxed and waned with mysterious rhythm, sometimes absent, sometimes radiant, always returning. Where the stars shimmered with distance, unreachable and unchanging, the moon felt close, intimate, as though it belonged not to the heavens, but to the earth itself. Its pale glow washed across rivers and valleys, touched the faces of hunters and farmers alike, and left its silver fingerprint upon the memory of all who looked upward. In myth, the moon became a mirror of humanity's own fears and hopes. Ancient stories tell of lovers separated and reunited with its cycles, of gods dwelling upon its surface, of animals chasing it across the night. To the Greeks, it was Selene, the shining goddess who drove her chariot across the sky. To the Maya, it was Ixchel, patroness of fertility, weaving life into the fabric of time. In Africa, tales spoke of the moon as a witness to the deeds of mortals, carrying memory into the heavens. In China, Chang'e ascended to the moon, leaving behind the world of men to dwell in luminous solitude. The moon was never just an object. It was a character in the great story of the cosmos, a presence woven into ritual, calendar, and imagination. But the moon is also a geological archive, a silent recorder of cosmic history. Unlike the restless Earth, with its shifting plates and ceaseless erosion, the lunar surface preserves scars billions of years old. Every crater is a memory of impact. Every dark mare, a frozen sea of ancient lava. To look at the moon is to gaze at a library of collisions, a testament to the violence that shaped not only its face, but the entire solar system. The same forces that scarred the moon also battered the Earth, though time and weather erased most of the evidence here. In this sense, the moon is our mirror, holding in its silence the record of catastrophes that our planet has long since forgotten. Speculation has always found fertile ground in this silence. Some imagine that the moon itself may hold secrets of civilizations older than our own. Could it be that if advanced cultures once walked the earth, erased by flood or fire, they might have reached the moon, leaving fragments of their presence in its dust? Mainstream science does not affirm such visions, yet the thought lingers, encouraged by the moon's otherness, its sense of watching. If Earth resets, if time erases, the moon endures, untouched by sea or storm. It is tempting to imagine it as a vault, a repository of stories older than we know, waiting in the dust to be uncovered. Yet even without such speculation, the moon carries profound weight in the human story. It gave us rhythm. Its cycles shaped calendars, guided tides, and marked the passing of seasons. Farmers planted by its phases, hunters timed their movements to its light. Sailors trusted it alongside the stars. Its waxing and waning became a metaphor for birth and death, loss and return, the eternal rhythm of renewal. Humanity learned to measure time not only by the sun's path, but by the moon's embrace of shadow and glow. In this way, the moon did not simply illuminate, it ordered, it gave shape to memory. The moon is also a teacher of perspective. When humanity first stepped upon its surface, when boot prints pressed into dust untouched for billions of years, the greatest revelation was not found in rocks or soil samples, but in the sight of the earth itself. Small, fragile, blue, and luminous, suspended in darkness. The earth seen from the moon became a mirror of humanity's shared home. That image, Earthrise, reshaped consciousness. For a moment, borders dissolved, conflicts seemed trivial, and the planet itself appeared as one living body, finite and precious. The moon became a vantage point from which humanity could see itself anew. Perhaps this is the moon's truest role, to reflect, to mirror, to remind. It reflects the light of the sun. It mirrors the cycles of life and death. It reminds us of our fragility and our endurance. It has no voice of its own, yet it carries all our voices, all our myths, all our gazes. When we look at it, we do not simply see rock and crater. We see the weight of our own longing, the projection of our own stories, the memory of our own passage through time. In contemplating the moon, we also confront the question of solitude. Are we alone beneath its glow? Or do the myths of visitors, of gods descending, of knowledge gifted, hint at a wider community in the cosmos? The moon, ever silent, does not answer. It only waits, watching as it has always watched, carrying its secrets in dust and shadow. Perhaps one day we will read its surface as we read scripts and stones, finding in its craters not only collisions of rock, but echoes of forgotten ages. Until then, it remains the mirror, reflecting both the light of the sun and the depth of our imagination. The story of the moon is the story of humanity itself, fragile yet enduring, silent yet eloquent, scarred yet luminous. It is the witness of every beginning and every ending, every fire lit against the dark, every word spoken into the night. To look at it is to remember that we are part of something vast, that our lives, however brief, are carried within rhythms older than memory. The moon will remain when we are gone, and perhaps it will still glow upon new beings who raise their eyes and wonder, as we have always wondered. And so our journey comes to its close, not with finality, but with reflection. From fire in the dark to hunters and herds, from seeds of dawn to drowned lands, from stones that speak to resets that erase, from voices in the underworld to visitors of memory, from forgotten scripts to the moon's eternal gaze. We have traced the arc of humanity's deep story, its mysteries, its resilience, its awe. What endures is not certainty, but wonder, Not answers, but questions. Not permanence, but the fragile beauty of memory carried forward. The moon, pale and constant, watches still. It watches as it has always watched. And in its silence, it whispers back the truth of all time, that we are part of something greater, a story still unfolding, written in fire, in stone, in myth, and in light. The end.